Hello friends, welcome back. In this video, we'll take a look at building Eduard Spitfire. Grab some delicious food and let's begin. When I opened the box, perfect spruce jumped out at me. The details are perfect. Fine but sharp panel lines and rivets. Since it's a profi pack, we have photo-etched parts and masks for the cockpit. For removing parts from the spruce, I'll use my favorite sharp Tamiya side cutters, and for most of the gluing, I'm gonna use thin glue. Like with any aircraft model, I start in the cockpit. First, I drilled weight-reducing holes in the cockpit's side walls and in the bulkhead behind the pilot's seat. Then I coated the surface with thin cement, which melted the plastic dust. I bent photo-etched parts in a bender and then glue them in place with superglue. The Spitfire cockpit is narrow, but I'll still try to create some of the wiring. I don't want to waste my time, so I selected places where they might be somewhat visible. The primary material is thin wire. I cut the piece of it and fixed it in place with superglue. To speed up the reaction, I use activator. The bond is almost instant. Let's paint. As a base, I spray Mr. Surfacer 1500 black. It creates a good base for upcoming layers. I wanted to create scratches and test the chipping MRP paints, and the cockpit seems like a good place for this test. So first I spray silver and on top of it 2 layers of chipping fluid from MO. After drying, I apply British cockpit green. The cockpit will be very dark when closed, so I will lighten it. I lighten the panel centers with a mix of the base cockpit color and light green. Then I highlight the edges of details using the dry brush technique. It's simple. I apply a little amount of paint on the brush and wipe most of it off on the cloth. When the brush leaves almost no trace, it's ready. I just gently go over the parts. Paint only catches on the raised detail. The next step is chipping the paint. I moisten the surface with water, wait a moment, and then disturb the surface with a sharp needle from an airbrush. When I start going over the surface with a toothpick, the paint starts to peel off in small chips. Chipping MRP paints is more difficult than, for example, Tamiya's acrylic range. Green is done, and I proceed with black. Details are painted with matte black from MO. Again, I use the dry brushing method to highlight details. Before applying the wash, I spray the surface with gloss varnish. This ensures the wash spreads well. I chose dark brown for the green parts and black for the silver ones. I applied them with a brush and cleaned the excess with thinner. Now I can add some colored photo-etched parts. I'm bending the belts in tweezers and fixing them in place using superglue. The instrument panel is made up of a sandwich of 3 parts. The surface seems dull to me. To break it up, I use splattering method. I apply thin oil paint with a brush through a toothpick. Random splatters are created on the surface which need to be blended. To represent accumulated grease and dirt, I apply oil paint on the bottom of the cockpit. After painting all the parts, it's time to put everything together. I fit the cockpit into the fuselage and everything fits perfectly. Undercarriage bays. They are made up of several parts, but fit well. The canals on the sprue are cleverly placed so they can be used as handles for spraying and then snapped off. Some panel lines on the fuselage need to be fixed. I used a razor saw and a sharp needle to add rivets. I wanted to add movement to the model, so I glued the elevator in deflected position. They naturally got into the dropped position by their weight when no locking mechanism was installed in the cockpit. I joined the fuselage with a wing and no problem. Brake lines need to be added to the landing gear. Simple modification using thin wire and superglue. There are pre-cut masks in the box. They fit perfectly. A liquid mask should be used to cover the canopy. Pre-cut mask is only done around the perimeter. The RAF construction is behind us and we can start painting. I filled the landing gear base with poster gum to cover them and glued the transparent parts. I start by applying primer as the first layer. It reveals any imperfections that need further attention and provides a good base for subsequent layers of paint. I begin spraying the lower surfaces using the pre-shading method. I'm spraying heavily thinned white paint onto the panel centers, also highlighting various areas. This effect will show after applying the main shade. This Spitfire carried the classic scheme on its lower surfaces. It was in sky color and the left wing was black. I start with the sky shade, spraying it diluted and gradually building the opacity to preserve the pre-shading effect. For the black side, I use the same approach. Highly thin paint is applied in thin layers. The upper surfaces will be a combination of green and brown. I'll use the post-shading method from the top. I start by spraying the entire model with green. Then I spray the panel centers with a mix of the original and the sand shade. This way I visually break up the surface. The surface ended up too sandy. No problem, I'll respray it with heavily thinned original green. It may not be very noticeable, but I emphasize the panel lines with a darker shade of green. Spitfires have relatively sharp transitions between colors, so I created masks. The process is simple. Just enlarge the model marking from the instructions to actual size of the model and cut out the color fields. I marked the fields I don't need to avoid mistakes. I stuck tape on a piece of laminated paper and glued the cutout field to it with double-sided tape. All that's left is to cut around the template and we have a precise mask. Then it needs to be applied to the model in the correct position. Now brown paint. I use the same process as with the green. First a spray of brown, then panel centers with a lighter shade, and finally panel lines with a dark shade. After drying, it's time to remove the masks. I also added a light blue identification stripe to the tail. Before applying decals, I spray the model with gloss varnish. This ensures proper adhesion of the decals to the surface and protects the paint from aggressive decal solutions. For the decals, I use combo from Mo. I dip the decals for 10 seconds in water, and when they can move freely on the paper, they are ready to be transferred to the model. I apply the decal set under the decal, place the decal, and remove excess fluid with a cotton bud. After drying, I put the decal fix on top. This softens it and allows it to better conform to the model's surface. This kit has new decals from Eduard, and this is the first time I've worked with them. After drying, it's possible to remove the top coat, leaving only the colored part on the model. It looks great, almost as if it were sprayed on. Some decals could be peeled off with tweezers, and others need to be carefully scraped off with a hobby knife. As a protection for further work on the model, I spray a new layer of gloss varnish. National and tactical markings are applied in the same way. In the case of large decals, it's sometimes necessary to cut panel lines and rivets. Now my favorite part. I want it to look like it just returned from a combat flight. Let's see how it turns out. To bring out rivets and panels, I apply dark wash. After letting it dry for a while, I wipe it off with a paper towel. Since the model is sprayed with gloss varnish, it wipes off easily without using thinner. Wash remains only in the recesses. For the black half of the wing, I apply a dark grey wash. The next step will be the chipping effect using a silver pencil. The pencil doesn't adhere well to the glossy surface, so the model needs to be sprayed with matte varnish. I'm adding chips mainly to the wing roots, around the gun covers and the fuel tank lid. I spray a highly diluted mix of black-brown to create dirt and grime. Layering this paint allows for different intensities of weathering. Again, around the gun covers, areas where personnel move, as well as fluid leaks around the engine compartment. I'm using this method to create exhaust stains too. The aircraft just returned from a flight, so I'm tearing off the tapes covering the weapons. To complete the weathering, I'm using oil paints. I created various streaks around the fuel tank where the fuel spilled during the rapid refueling by the ground crew. Similarly, fluid leaks mainly around the engine area. I create a dot with oil paint and spread it into the required shape with a brush dipped in thinner. It's a very safe method. If something goes wrong, everything can be wiped off and started again. Spitfires often operated from grassy airfields. We all know the weather in Great Britain, so I'm creating splatters underneath. The oil paint is applied through a toothpick, just like in the cockpit. Again, the advantage is that splatters we don't like can be easily removed. So let's finish it up. Position lights are painted silver and then transparent green and red. I cut out the wheel masks from masking tape using a cutting compass and applied them to the discs. The tire color is a mix of black and NATO black. I lightened the outer side with a lighter shade. Finally, a dark wash and a bit of dust on the tires. The propeller is black, but I broke the surface with irregular spraying of heavily thinned white. First, I sprayed the blade tips white and then yellow. This way the yellow will be more visible. After applying matte varnish, I created scratches on the leading edges of the blades in the same way as on the fuselage. I painted the detail of the hose on the landing gear legs with a brush, created the chrome part of the shock absorber with a piece of self-adhesive aluminum foil and brought up the details with a dark wash. Exhausts. From the pictures I've seen, various shades of brown reflect different temperatures: hot, wet, cold, hot again. I try to mimic this effect. First, I create a texture by stippling gray and white. I apply various rusty shades while wet to mix with each other. The whole effect is softened by spraying a black-brown mix. Burnt areas are created with a light sandy shade. Finally, all sub-assemblies need to be placed in their positions. For the IFF system antenna, I'll use a thin elastic thread from MO. I simply attach it with superglue on one side and then, after tensioning, on the other. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the build. It was a great kit, everything fit perfectly. I'm looking forward to the next model from Eduard. To those of you who watched all the way here, thank you, you are amazing. Don't forget to support the channel with likes and comments. And for those of you who would like even more extra content, I invite you to my Patreon. I post photos almost every day, so you'll be able to follow builds in real time, as well as watch videos a week in advance without ads. Thank you for every support. You give me more time for model building. See you in the next one.